Hey everybody, and welcome to another segment of AstrologyAnswers.com's weekly forecast. My name is Terence. The week begins on Monday, August the 7th, with the moon that sets the public tone in Taurus. Taurus is calming, it's steady, it likes its routine, and by mid-morning Pacific Daylight Time, the moon will be in harmony with stabilizing practical Saturn. This is a good beginning of the week for any kind of business matters, but also feeling really grounded and common sense with making any kinds of important decisions. On Tuesday, the moon continues in steady Taurus, and between 9 a.m. Pacific time, the moon will be in harmony with ambitious, assertive Mars. Now, the moon in Taurus can sometimes make us feel a little procrastinating, a little sluggish, a little slow, because we don't like to rush with the moon in calming, steady Taurus. But when it's in harmony in the morning, Pacific time, with Mars, Mars is that athletic warrior fire energy. So it puts a fire under us. And we start the day on Tuesday feeling more motivated, good for sports, good for all kinds of physical and recreational activities. By late afternoon Pacific time, the moon will be crossing Uranus, unpredictable, surprising Uranus. So this happens every 28 days as the moon takes 28 days to move through all the signs of the zodiac. That moon Uranus could trigger some unexpected surprises or upsets, but at the same time, the moon is in a stressful angle to the retrograde Venus. And so what could be happening for many of you by late afternoon Pacific time is there might be a relationship upset. And it could come in unexpectedly, where you're not feeling like you're getting your needs met, and maybe now you've had it, and you are really asserting yourself. On Wednesday, that retrograde Venus is now going to be squaring or forming a 90-degree angle of internal conflict to the Uranus. And so that continues even more of these unsettled upsets in relationships. But there's good news connected with it. Because Mercury, decision-making, communication Mercury, is in practical, analytical Virgo. So Mercury in Virgo gets a strong mindset overall. And the Mercury, also on Wednesday, will be in harmony, forming a trine to expansive, optimistic Jupiter. Now, Mercury-Jupiter by itself is great for traveling, great for publishing, great for education, because the Mercury can often be like the more focused mind, and the Jupiter is the more broad, expansive mind. Certainly triggers a lot of very optimistic, good conversations, which we take it back to the Venus retrograde, squaring Uranus, that it could have been an upset started on Tuesday, but by Wednesday, you could be feeling this anxiousness, but it could be compelling you to really talk about it and talk it through, especially as the moon is no longer in stubborn Taurus. And at 6:06 a.m. Pacific time, the moon entered into Gemini. Gemini is the sign ruled by communication Mercury. So that emotional tone, that public tone with the moon in Gemini for those next 2.5 days is good for all kinds of talking about your feelings and really having having really heartfelt conversations. The Mercury, ruler of Gemini, excellent with Jupiter, is also helping you give a broader perspective, bringing you more wisdom, seeing the better, bigger picture. So that Venus in retrograde is about reevaluating, resetting the relationship patterns. So that could be when you have, from Tuesday into Wednesday, you're starting to have maybe some kind of a hiccup to a crisis in a personal relationship, but the Mercury-Jupiter will really help you resolve it more amicably, more with wisdom. So it can be, wherever that Venus in retrograde, since July the 22nd when it went retrograde, been causing maybe some misunderstandings in relationships, this Wednesday can really help bring some healing and some broader, healthier perspective. On Thursday, as the moon continues in Gemini, it's going to be in harmony with the sun in Leo, because Gemini is an air sign, Leo is a fire sign. Fire and air is very compatible. Now, that is really strong by late afternoon Pacific time. But as you get into the early evening Pacific time, the moon will be in tension with Mars. So that could be triggering some unexpected emotional upsets. Could be some impulsive reactiveness. But you want to channel the energy. And so instead of being stressed, this would be with Mars. Mars is athletic and physical and active in that early evening. And many people around the world will already have been going to sleep. Well, that could even be that you have trouble sleeping because your mind is just, thinking about everything with the moon in Gemini. But if you're feeling this tension and stress or a little bit of irritability, and it's early evening, and if the sun is still out on the Pacific coast, you could be taking a walk and really getting that energy out of your body. On Friday, the moon continues in Gemini for a lot of the day. Late morning, the moon will be in tension with nebulous, foggy Neptune. So that's late morning Pacific time. That could be triggering a lot of emotional misunderstandings, confusions. And then the moon goes void, of course, at 10:28 a.m. Pacific time until 3:53 p.m. Pacific time, at which point the moon leaves the Gemini void and goes into emotional nurturing Cancer. That void, of course, which I mention every week, is when the moon is changing signs, but it's no longer making aspects to other planets. So the energy is flat. And so if you try to start any kind of new project, new job, the energy it's like the wind is not behind your sails. It's this sluggish, slow energy. It's a little bit like a mini Mercury in retrograde. So hold off for starting any important new endeavors until this moon goes into Cancer, 3:53 p.m. Pacific time. On Saturday, the moon continues in nurturing, caring Cancer. The Venus retrograde will be aligned with the sun by early evening, through the evening, starting early evening through the evening Pacific daylight time. This can actually be a really positive reset because the sun is putting a spotlight on all the necessary adjustments and changes with the Venus retrograde. Now, Venus in retrograde is not just about rethinking your relationships. The Venus in retrograde could also be having you second guess your creative projects, or wanting to bring back an old creative project from the past, dust it off and trying it again. You might be feeling this need for being more open socially, because where I'm going with that is, and it's a Saturday night, you could reconnect to an old friendship, an old lover, and maybe bring some closure or make a very nice reconnection. On Sunday, the moon continues in sensitive, nurturing Cancer, but late morning Pacific time, around 10 to 12 Pacific time, the moon will be in harmony with active, assertive Mars. Then early afternoon, maybe closer to 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time, now the moon is in harmony with dynamic, innovative Uranus. In other words, there's a lot of positive activity. And with the moon in Cancer, it could be doing projects around the home, playing sports and being active with family. But emotionally, that's that moon in Cancer. You could just be feeling so much more robust and vital and optimistic. So I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you next week with my next segment. Until then, be safe and well.